My name is Tom Clement. I have spent a 30-year career developing medical devices, starting in graduate school. First device I developed there was for gastroenterology, still being sold today by Olympus. I've moved into interventional cardiology, some neurosurgery, now doing a little bit of diagnostic cardiology work. I've had the chance to do some work this last year and a half at the University of Washington helping researchers understand how to get companies started and what it's going to take for them to move some of their better ideas into the marketplace.
How do you define success?
How do I define success? That's a multi-level answer, there's no question. Certainly for me, one of the aspects of success is doing something that impacts society, that's something that helps. In my case, I'm in development of devices for medical, and so figuring out a good device that's going to help a physician help their patients is clearly a piece of success. For me, I like the social science of building a company as much as I enjoy delivering a good product. So for me, success is knowing that my employees like going to work in the morning and sitting around with them, having a beer on Thursday night when they talk about how much they enjoy their job or how much this aspect of it is a challenge and they've had to work with so-and-so over there to figure it out, and the team sport that can develop in the correct culture.
Where did your inspiration come from?
There were three people that really impacted my life. So one of them really was the inspiration for me to do what I do today, which is develop the medical products. But there were two others. So my graduate advisor would have been my inspiration. He helped me even in an academic environment to realize that you needed to do something practical with the knowledge to make it beneficial to people. And he taught me some of the processes to go about that. But my father was a huge inspiration for me, teaching me the value of being honest and straight with people and how to respect people. And I had a mentor as I was working my way through college who was a real inspiration to me. He was at the time 75 years old and I was a 21-year-old, and he was born a slave on a plantation in Hawaii and had worked his way into running his own business. Even though he had a third-grade education, he could speak 5 languages fluently, and he taught me so much about what it meant to learn, and that learning didn't necessarily have to be in a classroom.
How did you move from idea to something actually succeeding in the market?
The first couple of things that I brought to market were ideas that somebody else had. And so, my graduate work was the idea of my professor. Then he started a company and hired me as a second employee, and again, the ideas were largely his, and I just facilitated getting them commercialized. The last company I helped start, though, Pathway Medical, that's kind of an interesting question, because financially was in a whole different time frame. Late 90s, there was a lot of money. We had a great and wealthy angel who gave myself and my partner a couple $1 million to go figure out a problem. And he basically said, I want you to spend some time understanding some of the most thorny medical problems and pick one and solve it. So it gave us a chance to play like kids, looking at benign prostate hyperplasia or stroke or different cancers. And in the end, ironically, I guess, we came back to our comfort zone in cardiology. And there had been a problem that we were faced with at Heart Technology, and my co-founder and I both came out of the same organization at Heart. And we had tried for years to invent a solution to how our business is, how to clean out arteries and how to go in small and then get bigger inside the artery. And both of us had numerous ideas, several which had been patented, all of which we knew basically from an early prototype didn't. And then one day, a year and a half after we'd started the company, a year maybe, I woke up in the morning with an idea of how to do this. And it was just like I woke up with this thing and I called Ted and we got together and I said, Ted, let me describe this to you because I can't draw. I can't do stick figures that people recognize, and he's a wonderful artist, and I just started describing it, and he's drawing it, and we both were getting more and more excited as this went. And he goes, well, this could work. this could actually work. And so we got to work that day prototyping it, and ultimately brought it to market, and now it's being manufactured in Kirkland and sold.
How did you organize your team?
I'd focus on Pathway on this one because that's the one I built from scratch. But it really, so much of it counts on and depends on what I'd learned through the previous company and watching what worked and what didn't work. And I guess just to digress slightly, the first company, Hart Technology, we built from scratch to 550 people, and we really learned team-based design work. And it was something that I helped implement there, where you would have a project leader, could be from any of the disciplines in the company, whether it's quality or manufacturing or engineering or even regulatory, and they would be a kind of a team leader, and then all of the other disciplines would participate. And we just found that to be extremely effective in terms of solving problems and getting things done in a way that was efficient. So when you're done at the end, you're not handing it off from engineering to manufacturing that then had to work with quality to see if it was going to work or not. In the meantime, we were acquired, and I ended up with 30 employees from the parent company in Minneapolis, as well as the team out here in Seattle. And I had the chance there to try to work with this other culture and implement some of these same concepts, and it just fell flat on its face. I mean, these people weren't used to being creative or working in team environments. It's no, that's not the way we work. We're just going to develop this. We'll hand it off to somebody else and figure out how to make it. So then when I started Pathway, we really went back to that core of the team-based design work. And it was working beautifully, and we were actually making great progress through a series of events, including a number of things out of our control. We ended up folding the company, or hibernating the company, in 2004 and laying off, at the time, 55 employees. And we restarted. So the good thing was we just reinvented the business plan, went back to work. But the real key there is, in growing and trying to get really quickly into some regulatory clinical trials, I let that team concept get away from me, and we really started being dominated by functions in this company that shouldn't have been dominant. They should have been partners, not dominant. And the culture fell apart, and it was really almost in a way a good thing, because when we restarted the company, we got back to this core of, you want the people around you that you want to go to battle with every day, and that you can lean on, and that inevitably things go wrong, and then we wanted to be in a position where people roll up their sleeves, they'd stay late, they'd come in early. And so I invited 20 people to come back. They all came back, and these folks then developed a methodology to hire people that was just incredible. And so it got to a point where they could run a person through a 2-day gamut of tests, and at the end know if they wanted to work with them or not. And it was more a psychological test than a what kind of skill sets do you have. So we use it to hire everybody from an HR person to an engineer to a marketing person. And it involved so many things, like the one that I used to love is, here's a pile of Legos, and you've got to build this little car, and we're going to time you. And everybody gets competitive in how fast can I do it, but more important than anything was the reaction that they gave you. And it's like, that's kind of a crap test. Why should I have to do that? I'm an engineer. Okay, bye-bye, we don't need you. And if you realize the fact that, we're just having some fun here, you fit in better. And so we built it's just an incredible team of people on the remake, on the rebound. So,
if you could have, what would you have done differently?
I think we all learn so much from our mistakes that, in a way, you kind of need to make mistakes to grow and to learn. And one of the old adages of, if you don't fall down, if you're skiing and you don't fall down, you're not trying hard enough, is I believe that's true. And yet, when you do make mistakes, and I've made plenty, you'd like to avoid those. It's kind of a waste of time in some sense, but what a conundrum, right? If I knew then what I know now, I wouldn't have made those mistakes. The life would have been much faster. But there's a couple things. They largely, one I just mentioned is, we allowed the culture to get out of hand at Pathway in our first phase, and I wished I'd listened to my instincts. A very specific example, we used to, and I still do in my companies, on Friday afternoon we have a happy hour, and everybody sits around, we drink a beer together, and we talk about the week, and maybe it's your personal life or something, but it bonds. And we got to a point in the first phase of Pathway, as it was getting into the financial difficulties, where we had people saying, you can't drink beer on the premises. What if the FDA walked in? And all of a sudden, I kind of let them take over and run this thing, which was wrong, because it wouldn't have mattered, and it was a piece of this, symbolic of this thing breaking down. Another thing we did, and this was my bad for sure, early on in the Pathway days when we had the money to go explore different ideas, we bumped into a project, which was an MRI surface coil project, so a diagnostic system that was capital equipment based. And it was a beautiful piece of technology, and I'm a physicist, so I love the technology, and I like the people a lot. And they asked us to manufacture it for them, so we took it on, and then ultimately we acquired it for a percentage of the company. The real mistake was we did not understand the sales model for capital equipment. You know, our business and what I knew was how to sell disposables. How do you sell one-time use devices? And so when we brought the product to market, which we did successfully, then we suffered dramatically through the sales cycle. We just didn't know how to get that accomplished. So it's a couple of examples. There's many more.
What makes a great entrepreneur?
Good question. Good question. I always think of it, there's obviously not one single trait, right? I think being an entrepreneur is, you have to be a risk taker. You have to have a genetic disposition towards risk. People talk about the risk, I'm convinced that there's something to that, and if you don't have it, if you're not willing to take a chance, there's no way to be an entrepreneur. So the anecdote I always talk about, and you have to be willing to take on a scary situation, right? So when I was lucky enough to be able to go to climb Everest, everybody says, aren't you scared? And I go, no, I'm excited. And when I start a company, they say, aren't you excited? I go, no, I'm scared. But it's that willingness to take a risk and go is clearly there. You also have to be stubborn. You have to be persistent. You have to be willing to change. I mean, I don't know the exact statistics, but a huge percentage of startups end up doing something different than they designed to do at the beginning. You have to be flexible. You have to, you have to know how to go look for money. You have to be willing to deal with people that you might not necessarily want to. I mean, the financial community is just a different animal from those of us who are creating devices and creating companies, but they're an integral part of it. So you have to learn how to deal with that. There's just so many traits I think you have to have.
What role did education have in your success?
Yeah, education is everything, isn't it? And I'm not necessarily speaking about formal education, but learning. I'm fortunate enough to have met a lot of people that invite me into classrooms, and so I can watch different styles and I can assist with my own styles. And the thing to me is you go to school to learn how to learn. And every job you take is a new education. Everything you do, you have to learn something. So education is a daily thing. It's critical. I was lucky enough to be in a position to qualify to get into a university and to get a degree and get a second degree and learn a lot of things, frankly, and have mentors. As I mentioned, my graduate advisor, great mentors who helped. But in the end, you end up in the next job and you're still learning. And so education's key, but it's the kind of maybe the will to do it, or the understanding that it's not a defined moment in time, it's really a continuum of time.
What's the most important question we didn't ask you, and what's your answer?
Well, the questions are good and pretty thorough. I think a lot of what is the character of people are their other experiences, and so one of the things you might have asked are, like, what are your hobbies, or what else do you do? It's something I always ask in an interview is, I'm interested in how people tick, and what else do they do? If it's like, I go to work, I go home, I lay on the couch, eat pizza, drink beer, watch soap operas, okay, I mean, that's your choice, but it's not particularly interesting, If it's, I conduct classes in the evening for people who have learning disabilities, that's pretty darn cool, right? And so that interests me, and that would suck me into them. But so you didn't ask me what I do for hobbies, although I mentioned mountain climbing, which I'm not doing as actively anymore. I grow trees. I have a large forest, trying to resuscitate it. I just love nature. I like being outside. I enjoy people. I just enjoy doing things with people and helping. I'm on tons of boards of directors. It's a little bit burdensome at the moment. There's too many of them, but each involves the chance, especially the ones with young companies where you know, they're really aggressive, smart young people, but they don't yet have the maybe the mentor to help them. I love that a lot, you know, so I do a bunch of